The world should have been silent, a sacred space filled only with the soft, suckling sounds of my 10 newborn daughters. 10. An impossible, miraculous number. I was a vessel of life, a creator of a decade of miracles, all at once. But as I sat there, tandem feeding 2 of them, my body still a battlefield of aches and stitches, his voice shattered the peace. "Look at you," he hissed, his words dripping with a venom that was more painful than any physical blow. "Surrounded by your failures, a walking curse." And I didn't look up. I couldn't. My focus was on the tiny, perfect mouth latched onto me, the delicate flutter of eyelashes against a rose-petal cheek. I was trying to pour life into her, but his hatred was poisoning the air we breathed. My tears started to fall, silent and hot, splashing onto the blanket wrapped around my daughter. My tears mixed with their milk. Then his hand was in my hair. He didn't just pull. He twisted, yanking my head back with a force that sent a jolt of white-hot pain down my spine. The baby in my arms startled, her cry a sharp, sudden knife in the tension-filled room. "Are you listening to me?" he snarled, his face so close to mine I could smell the bitter coffee on his breath. 10 of them, 10 more mouths to feed, 10 more burdens, and not a single one of them a son. "You haven't just failed me. You've cursed this family." And I squeezed my eyes shut, a single sob escaping my lips. In that moment, with his hand tangled in my hair and the cries of my startled children echoing around me, a terrifying clarity washed over me. He didn't see 10 miracles. He saw 10 mistakes. And he saw me, their mother, as the source of it all. This wasn't just disappointment. This was a declaration of war. And he had no idea that the woman he was trying to break was the only thing holding his world together. NFOR, all my viewers, I have a small request. Please tell me which country you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me. Now let's continue the story. The Gilded Cage NMY marriage to Liam wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a strategic alliance, a merger of 2 families who cared more about legacy than love. I was the daughter of a respectable but financially struggling family, and he was the sole heir to a construction empire. From the moment we were introduced, I was told what a great honor it was. "He will give you a life of comfort," my father had said, his eyes avoiding mine. "Your duty is to give him a son to carry on his name." And I was young, and I mistook his quiet, possessive nature for strength. He wasn't loud or boisterous. His control was subtle, a silken rope that tightened so gradually you didn't realize you were being strangled. He bought me expensive jewelry, but criticized my taste in clothes. He praised my hosting skills at his business dinners, but later told me I spoke too much. He built me a beautiful house, but it was a gilded cage, every door locked with his expectations. NTHE pressure for a son started on our wedding night. As he unclasped a diamond necklace from my neck, he whispered, "Our firstborn will be a boy. He will inherit all of this." It wasn't a hope. It was a command. I smiled, too naive to understand the weight of his words. NFOR the first few years, I failed to conceive it all. Each month was a fresh wave of disappointment, not from me, but from him. He never shouted, but his silence was louder than any scream. He would look at me with a cold, appraising stare, as if I were a faulty piece of machinery. He sent me to countless doctors, each visit a humiliating reminder of my inadequacy. The problem, they said, was with him, a low sperm count, a slim chance of fatherhood. NHE refused to believe it. The reports were buried, the doctors dismissed as incompetent. In his mind, the fault had to be mine. It was easier for his ego to accept a flawed wife than a flawed self. When I finally became pregnant after years of invasive treatments, the news was met not with joy, but with a tense, expectant hush. Liam's entire demeanor shifted. He became obsessed. He hired a nutritionist to dictate my diet. a trainer to manage my gentle exercise, and even a spiritual guide who claimed he could influence the baby's gender. My body was no longer my own. It was a vessel for his legacy, a project he was micromanaging to ensure the desired outcome. The day of the first ultrasound was like a corporate board meeting. He sat stiffly, his jaw clenched, as the doctor moved the probe over my belly. When the screen flickered to life, I saw not one heartbeat, but a flurry of them. 10. The doctor gasped, her face a mask of disbelief. "This is unprecedented," she stammered. "Mrs. Thorne, you're carrying 10 babies." And I felt the air leave my lungs. 10. A wave of terror and awe washed over me. I looked at Liam, expecting to see a flicker of that same wonder. Instead, his face was pale, his eyes wide with a look I couldn't decipher. It wasn't joy. It was horror. "Are they boys?" he demanded, his voice sharp. NTHE doctor, flustered, explained it was too early to tell with certainty, especially with so many. But from that moment on, the silken rope of his control became an iron chain. He saw the pregnancy not as a miracle, but as a freak show, another way I had managed to fail him by doing something so abnormal. He isolated me completely, forbidding visitors and screening my calls. "We can't have people gossiping," he'd say. "Not until we know." NHE was waiting for the gender reveal, the final report card on my performance as his wife. I spent the rest of my pregnancy in a state of suspended animation, a prisoner in my own home. My only companions, the 10 tiny lives fluttering inside me. I would talk to them, sing to them, promise them a world of love, even as I feared the world their own father was creating for them. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that their value in his eyes would be determined by something they couldn't control. And I began to understand that my value had always been measured by that same impossible standard. The verdict NTHE birth was a medical spectacle. A team of 24 doctors and nurses orchestrated the delivery with military precision. The operating room was a blindingly white, sterile environment, the air humming with the beeps and whirs of machines that were monitoring every single one of us. Liam wasn't allowed inside, a hospital policy for such a complex procedure, but I knew he saw it as another slight, another loss of control. One by one, they were lifted from me. A chorus of cries filled the room, each one a testament to a life that had beaten impossible odds. "A girl," the head surgeon announced the first time. Then again, "Another girl." And again, and again. 10 times, the same word echoed in the operating room. "Girl." In a wave of profound, overwhelming love washed over me. They were here. They were alive. They were mine. The exhaustion, the fear, the years of uncertainty, it all melted away, replaced by a fierce, primal need to protect these 10 perfect daughters. The nurses, their faces beaming with genuine wonder, began the delicate process of cleaning and checking each one before placing them in the row of waiting incubators. When they finally wheeled me into the recovery room, Liam was already there. He stood by the window, his back to me, a rigid silhouette against the city lights. The air was thick with his unspoken fury. He didn't turn when I entered. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask about the babies. "Liam?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. NHE turned slowly, and his face was a mask of cold, contained rage. His eyes, usually a flat, emotionless gray, were now burning with a dark fire. 10, he said, his voice dangerously low. "You gave me 10 of them. They're beautiful. I managed, my heart starting to pound. They're all healthy. They're worthless." He spat, the words striking me with physical force. 10 chances, and you failed, every single time. What am I supposed to do with 10 daughters? Who will carry my name? Who will take over the business? You've not only failed to give me an heir, you've given me a decade's worth of liabilities. NHI's cruelty was so absolute, so devoid of any humanity, that I couldn't even form a response. I just stared at him, the man I had shared a bed with, the man whose children I had just brought into the world. He looked at me not as his wife, but as a failed investment he was ready to liquidate. NTHAT was the moment the hook scene happened. The nurses, sensing the need for a mother's touch, began bringing the babies to me, 2 at a time. It was as I was trying to manage the first feeding, my body screaming in protest, my heart soaring with love, that he unleashed his fury. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back, his face contorted with disgust as he called me a curse. Unwon A. Schultz, the nurses froze, their faces pale with shock. One of them, a kind-faced woman named Maria, took a half-step forward, her hand outstretched as if to intervene. But Liam's glare, sharp and deadly as a shard of glass, stopped her in her tracks. He released my hair with a shove, and I slumped forward, the pain in my scalp a dull echo of the agony in my soul. NHE stormed out of the room without another word, leaving behind a silence that was more terrifying than his rage. The cries of my babies filled the void. I looked down at the 2 in my arms, their tiny faces crumpled in distress, and then at the 8 others in their incubators. 10 pairs of eyes that would one day look to me for answers, for safety, for love. And in that moment, the last vestiges of the naive girl who had married him died. She was replaced by a mother, and a mother, I was quickly learning, was a force of nature. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea he had just forged me into a weapon. The fight for my daughter's future had just begun, and I would not lose. The silent Warren returning home was like stepping back into the cage, but this time I was aware of the bars. The house, once a symbol of wealth and comfort, now felt like a mausoleum, cold and silent. Liam had hired a team of nannies, not out of concern for me or the babies, but to manage the problem I had created. He wanted the children fed, changed, and most importantly, quiet. He wanted them to be invisible. Aunt H.E. treated me with a chilling indifference. He moved into a separate wing of the house, communicating with me only through the staff or with curt, dismissive remarks. He never once held any of the girls. He never asked their names. When he looked at them, his expression was one of profound distaste, as if they were vermin that had infested his pristine home. This Cold War was his strategy, to isolate me, to wear me down, to make me feel as worthless as he believed I was. But he underestimated me. He didn't see the change in me. The fear he had cultivated for years had been burned away by the fire of maternal rage. My silence was no longer born of submission. It was born of strategy. I began my own silent war. My first objective was to gather resources. Liam controlled every penny. I had no bank account, no credit cards, not even cash of my own. My allowance had been cut off the day we came home from the hospital, so I started small. The nannies he hired were my first unwitting allies. I saw the pity in their eyes, the way they flinched when he entered a room, and I started with Maria, the nurse from the hospital who had tried to intervene. I found her agency and requested her specifically. When she arrived, I saw the relief in her eyes. "I was so worried," she whispered when we were alone. I confided in her, not everything, but enough. I told her I needed to build a life for my daughters away from their father's toxicity. She understood. NSHE helped me sell the jewelry Liam had bought me over the years, the gilded bars of my cage. One by one, a diamond bracelet, a sapphire necklace, emerald earrings. They were discreetly sold through a trusted contact of hers. The money was funneled into a secret bank account she helped me open under a name he would never think to check, my mother's maiden name. NMY's second objective was information. Liam's business was his pride, his identity, the very thing he valued more than family. I knew that to truly hurt him, to dismantle his power, I had to strike him there. I began to pay attention. I listened to his phone calls from the shadows of the hallway. I started reading the business papers he carelessly left on his desk, assuming I was too stupid to understand them. And I learned about his partners, his deals, his investments. I discovered he wasn't the brilliant, untouchable businessman he pretended to be. He was reckless, cutting corners on safety regulations in his construction projects, engaging in shady backroom deals, and creating a complex web of shell companies to hide his assets and evade taxes. He was building an empire on a foundation of lies, and I started meticulously documenting every crack. And I used the nanny cam system he had installed to monitor the staff to my own advantage. I positioned them not just in the nursery but in hallways overlooking his study. I recorded his furious, abusive tirades, his cold pronouncements of my worthlessness, his utter disregard for his children. I backed up the files onto a small, encrypted hard drive that I kept hidden in the lining of a diaper bag. The girls were my motivation. Every time I felt a flicker of fear, I would go into the nursery. I would stand there in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of my 10 daughters. I would look at their faces, each one unique, each one a universe of potential. I saw future doctors, artists, leaders, thinkers. They were not curses. They were a legion. And I was their general, quietly assembling my army and my arsenal, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Liam thought he was winning by ignoring us. He had no idea that in the shadows of his neglect, a revolution was brewing. The first crack in the armor and FOR, 2 years, I lived a double life. To Liam and the world, I was the broken, submissive wife, quietly raising the 10 daughters who were a source of public curiosity and private shame. But in secret, I was an intelligence operative, gathering the ammunition I would need to win my freedom. The hidden bank account grew steadily, and the encrypted hard drive became a treasure trove of his sins. NTHE's first opportunity to test my newfound power came unexpectedly. Liam was hosting a lavish dinner party for his most important business partners and investors. It was a critical evening. He was trying to secure funding for a massive new skyscraper project, the crowning jewel of his career. He had ordered me to be present, to be the perfect, smiling hostess, a beautiful prop to adorn his arm. "Do not embarrass me," he had warned, his voice a low threat. And I dressed in a stunning gown he had chosen, my face a mask of serene elegance. I moved through the party with a grace that belied the storm raging inside me. I laughed at the right moments, nodded attentively, and played my part to perfection. Liam was pleased. I could see it in the smug curl of his lips. He thought he had me perfectly trained. NTHE's main investor was a man named Marcus Vance, a shrewd, older gentleman known for his meticulous due diligence. Throughout the evening, I made sure to engage him in conversation. I didn't talk about business directly. I talked about family, about values, about the importance of building things that last, things that are safe. Later, as the guests mingled, I saw my chance. Liam was holding court across the room, his back to us. I approached Marcus Vance, who was admiring a painting in the hallway. "Mr. Vance," I said softly, my voice filled with a carefully crafted vulnerability. "Liam would be mortified if he knew I was speaking to you about this, but I have to." NHI's eyes sharpened with interest. "Go on, Mrs. Thorne. I know how important safety and integrity are to you," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "I worry sometimes. Liam, he takes such risks. He cuts corners to meet deadlines, especially with materials. He calls it efficiency, but I lie awake at night, praying that one of his buildings doesn't have a fault, especially this new one, the foundation." I overheard him on the phone with the supplier. "It's not the grade he's promising in the prospectus." And I let the words hang in the air, a seed of doubt planted in the most fertile ground imaginable. I didn't show him proof. I didn't need to. I just needed to give him a reason to look closer. I touched his arm lightly. "Please, don't tell him I said anything. He would be so angry." Marcus Vance's expression was unreadable, but he gave me a short, sharp nod. "Your secret is safe with me, my dear. NTHE next week." The deal stalled. Vance's firm initiated a surprise, independent audit of Liam's material suppliers and safety protocols. They found exactly what I knew they would: discrepancies, substandard materials, and falsified safety reports. The funding was pulled. The skyscraper project, Liam's legacy, crumbled before a single brick was laid. NLIAM was apoplectic. He stormed through the house for days, a caged tiger roaring with impotent rage. He fired assistants, screamed at his partners, but he never once suspected me. In his world, I was invisible, powerless, incapable of such a precise and devastating attack. He blamed his enemies, his competitors, bad luck, everyone but the silent woman who watched him from across the dinner table. And I felt no guilt. I felt a cold, thrilling surge of power. It was the first crack in his armor, and I had made it. I had used his own arrogance and his underestimation of me as a weapon. As he raged about his ruined legacy, I went into the nursery and kissed each of my 10 sleeping daughters. Their legacy, I vowed, would be built on a foundation of truth, strength, and freedom, and I was just getting started. And the Alliance NTHE failure of the skyscraper project changed Liam. The cold indifference morphed into a volatile, unpredictable anger. The financial pressure mounted, and the cracks in his empire began to show. He started drinking more heavily, and his verbal abuse escalated, no longer confined to the privacy of our wing of the house. He would sneer at me in front of the nannies, making cruel remarks about my brood of daughters. NMY daughters, now toddlers, were beginning to understand. They would shrink away when he entered a room, their laughter dying in their throats. I saw the fear in their eyes, and it solidified my resolve. It was time to escalate my plan. It was time to find an ally who could wield the weapons I had gathered. And I remembered Liam's oldest business partner, a man named George Petrova. George was a co-founder of the company, a man from the old school who had built the business with Liam's father. In recent years, Liam had systematically pushed him to the margins, seeing his cautious, ethical approach as a weakness. I had overheard Liam mocking George, calling him a dinosaur who didn't understand the new rules of the game. I knew George harbored a deep resentment and, more importantly, a deep-seated sense of integrity. He was my best hope. Arranging a meeting was risky. I used a burner phone I had purchased with my secret funds and called his private line, leaving a cryptic message. I am a friend of your legacy and an enemy of its destruction. I have information that is vital to the future of the company. Meet me. I named a small, discreet cafe in a neighboring town. NHE came. He was an older man with tired eyes, but they lit with a spark of curiosity when he saw me. He clearly had no idea why Liam Thorne's wife would summon him, and I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the encrypted hard drive across the table. Everything you need to know is on here, Mr. Petrova, I said, my voice steady. Years of financial records, evidence of tax evasion through shell companies, falsified safety reports for nearly every project in the last 5 years, and recordings. NHI's eyebrows shot up. Recordings? Of Liam, discussing his methods, admitting to fraud, and other things. I let the implication hang in the air. He is going to run this company into the ground. His recklessness will destroy everything you and his father built. Worse, people could get hurt. A building could fail. He needs to be stopped. George stared at the hard drive as if it were a venomous snake. He was silent for a long time, his mind clearly racing. Why are you doing this? He finally asked, his gaze searching mine. This is your husband, your life. I met his gaze without flinching. He has 10 daughters, Mr. Petrova. He has never once held them. He calls them a curse. He sees them as liabilities on a balance sheet. My life is no longer about protecting my husband. It's about protecting my children from him. He is a danger to them, and he is a danger to the public. You believe in honor. You believe in safety. Help me save the company from him, and in doing so, you will help me save my daughters. A flicker of understanding, of empathy, crossed his face. He had grandchildren. He understood legacy in a way Liam never could. He picked up the hard drive. "Anne, I will look at this," he said, his voice firm. If what you say is true, I will do what needs to be done. NTHAT was the beginning of the end for Liam. George was methodical. He used my evidence to quietly build a case with a select group of loyal board members and a team of forensic accountants. They worked in the shadows, preparing for a corporate coup that would be swift and decisive. While they prepared their attack, I made my own final preparations. I secured a small, furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood miles away. I slowly moved essential items, clothes, toys, documents, out of the house, hiding them in a storage unit. The nannies, loyal to me now, helped, covering for my absences and smuggling bags out of the house as if they were bags of trash. NTHE tension in the house was unbearable. Liam was a wounded animal, lashing out at everyone, but I felt a strange sense of calm. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow. I was a strategist, watching the final pieces of my plan move into place. The day of reckoning was coming. The fall NTHE day of the annual shareholders meeting was a cold, gray Tuesday. Liam left the house in his finest suit, a mask of arrogant confidence firmly in place. He was going to project strength, to reassure everyone that the company was stable despite the recent setbacks. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. I watched him leave from an upstairs window. As soon as his car disappeared down the long driveway, I initiated the final phase of my plan. The nannies I trusted helped me load my 10 daughters into a large van I had rented. The girls were excited, thinking it was a special adventure. In a way, it was. It was the first day of their new lives. NWE drove away from that house without a single look back. We left behind the gilded cage, the cold silences, the lingering scent of fear. I took them not to our new apartment, but to a beautiful public garden. For hours, we just played. I pushed them on the swings, watched them chase butterflies, and listened to the sound of their unrestrained laughter under the open sky. For the first time, they were completely free, and so was I. Meanwhile, miles away, Liam's world was imploding. George Petrova executed the coup with surgical precision. At the meeting, just as Liam began his speech, George stood up and called for a vote of no confidence. He then presented the board and the shareholders with the evidence. Not all of it, just enough. The financial malfeasance, the reckless endangerment, NTHE fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Liam was blindsided. His allies on the board, faced with irrefutable proof of his crimes, abandoned him. He was voted out of his own company in a humiliating public spectacle. As he stumbled out of the meeting, stripped of his title and his power, he was met not by his driver, but by federal agents. The evidence of tax evasion and fraud had been anonymously delivered to the IRS and the SEC that morning. NHI's phone started ringing. It was me. He answered, his voice a strangled gasp. "What have you done?" he choked out. "I did what you never could," I said, my voice clear and cold. I was standing on a small hill in the garden, watching my daughters play below. I protected the family's legacy. "You've ruined me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No, Liam," I said, the sound of my children's laughter in the background. "You did this to yourself. You just never bothered to look at the person you were destroying. You thought I was a curse. But a mother's love? That's the most powerful force in the universe. You should have remembered that." Nye hung up the phone. I knew his assets would be frozen, his reputation shattered, his future a bleak landscape of courtrooms and consequences. He had lost everything he ever valued, his money, his power, his name. I turned my attention back to my daughters. They were chasing each other in circles, their faces bright with joy. They were my legacy, not his. They were 10 miracles, and their lives were just beginning. The war was over. We had won, and the legacy of love and THE, years that followed, were not always easy, but they were ours. The divorce was messy on paper, but simple in reality. Liam had nothing left to fight with. The evidence I had collected ensured I got full custody, and a settlement drawn from the few assets the government didn't seize. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. It was a start. NWE lived in a small, cozy house that was filled with noise, chaos, and an abundance of love. I worked, I studied, and I poured everything I had into my girls. I taught them to be strong, but also to be kind. I taught them to be independent, but also to rely on each other. Our home became a fortress built not of brick and stone, but of unwavering sisterly love and mutual respect. George Petrova, true to his word, restructured the company. He made safety and ethics its cornerstone. He quietly set up a trust for my daughters. Education, a gesture of gratitude, he said, was for saving the company's soul. NMY girls grew into remarkable young women. Each one was different, a unique facet of a brilliant gem. One became a passionate lawyer who fought for victims of domestic abuse. Another became an architect who designed affordable, safe housing. One was a teacher, another a scientist, another an artist whose work celebrated the strength of women. They were not liabilities. They were assets to the world. Liam was eventually convicted. He served a few years in a low-security prison and was released a broken man, a ghost of his former self. I heard he lived in a small apartment on the other side of the country, working a menial job. He never tried to contact us. In the end, he had made himself invisible, just as he had once tried to do to his own children. One evening, years later, my 10 daughters and I were gathered in my living room. They were all grown, some with families of their own. We were celebrating my 60th birthday. The room was overflowing with laughter, stories, and the cries of a new generation. My grandchildren, both boys and girls, all cherished. NMY eldest daughter Elara stood to give a toast. She looked at me, her eyes shining with tears. "They say one person can't change the world," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But you changed our world. You taught us that our worth isn't determined by others, but by the strength in our hearts. You are not a curse, Mama. You are the greatest blessing we have ever known." And as my 10 daughters and their families applauded, I looked at the beautiful legacy surrounding me. It wasn't a legacy of wealth or power, but one of love, resilience, and unbreakable bonds. The memory of Liam's hand in my hair, of his hateful words, was now just a faint scar, a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. NMY tears fell once more, but this time they were not tears of sorrow mixing with milk. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy, watering the beautiful garden I had cultivated from the ashes of a life I had been forced to burn down. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had given my daughters the one thing their father never could, a world where they were cherished, not for what they could provide, but simply for who they were.